Now, upper mid tier. This is where you get to the characters that, while they're certainly not solo viable, there's certainly huge issues. They have a niche in the meta, as the tier describes, right? Like, as a secondary, there's use for them. Or if you main them, like, you actually have the ability to get good brackets. With that said, these characters, I think, across the board, generally have a bad matchup spread against the good characters, right? Like, this tier was previously described as good on paper, likely to run into bad matchups in bracket. And you can see it with all these characters. I think Duck Gun's very underrated, by the way. I think this character is extremely underexplored. I think people just don't like the feel of Duck Gun, which I don't blame people for it. But I think this character's space control with projectiles is amazing. And he's a very binary character where if you have the ability to control, if you have the time to set up projectiles, this character is actually obnoxious to fight. But fighting characters that can hit him as he's trying to set up all of his projectile game, he struggles a lot. So really good into some characters. I feel like him versus Diddy, him versus Peach has to be really strong. But then him versus like Fox, him versus Mimmin, no bro, it's just not happening. All right, Donkey Kong. I mean, big grappler, right? And I think for him it's very obvious. He's super good into sorties and just generally good into characters that like have to fight. But with all the characters that can just play hit and run or zone really aggressively, he falters. And of course, big body, easy to edge guard combo. Like, even in his good matchups, he's super inconsistent, but even his bad matchups, he's super inconsistent. But I think as like a secondary, someone like the duo main like DK and a top tier, he'd actually have a lot of utility. Young Link, another character that people thought was gonna be really good when Ultimate came out, kind of just fell off. And honestly, for all of his strengths, his poor airspeed, lightweight status, and poor recovery hindered him really hard. He has trouble spacing people out with his aerials because of his airspeed. Hitboxes just aren't the best. And it's kind of like Banjo, honestly, where you have this character where the projectile game is very effective, but then the rest of the kit surrounding it doesn't do enough. All right, and then Cinnamoroar, polarizing, right? Big body, hits hard, very slow, massive hitboxes, great frame data, not much disjoint. I don't think much needs to be said about him. You can see success with him, but you could also run into like Sonic and pools and just be going 0-2. Ices. Honestly, as complicated as the character is, very similar to Incineroar, where it's like, if you can fight the opponent, insane damage output. You have disjoints, you have good frame data. Like, your Ices buttons are insane. But you're fighting a Steve making walls, a Sonic running around, or just like a really effective zoner like Midman, you're going to lose this bracket. All right. Toon Link's interesting. Because we're seeing like Toon Link level 1 beat Spargo, and I've just been seeing Toon Links honestly rise up a little bit more, doing not like the best but better than like low tier. The character's neutral is good. I think this is the first character where like it's not their neutral is good, but no, they have a good neutral just across the board. The problem is they don't get enough reward off of winning neutral. Like, their damage output is a little low. They have kill steps, but it's not easy to hit like aware players with those. And even though they have a good neutral, they still have the issue of like other projectile characters that can camp a little bit harder than them. Other sword characters just heavily outrange them. Speedsters tend to be faster. So like, even though the character has actual strengths, it kind of ends up being, I feel like with most characters, can like do what Toon Link does a little better in certain areas. And Toon Link especially isn't getting enough reward for winning the neutral to compensate for the times that when they are going to lose neutral. But yeah, this character honestly has the most potential of any character in this tier to go to high tier long term. I can see it. All right, Rosa. I've talked about this character enough on my channel, right? I wonder why. This character's issue is she's really good into certain matchups, right? I think she's actually an exceptionally polarizing character. You ever see her versus Luigi, or like her versus Diddy Kong? She's even one of the very few characters with a winning matchup on Game & Watch. Like, she does well into Rob, does well into Kazu, right? Weird. But then you ever see her fighting a Steve? You ever see her fighting an Aegis? Yeah, extraordinarily polarizing. And she basically lives and dies by her ability to win neutral over and over and over, like almost guaranteed. And if she doesn't have the ability to just win neutral in the matchup for free, her low damage output, kill power, and lightweight status screws her. All right, Byleth. Character is, still a good character. obviously fall off as people learn the matchup. And I think the issue with the character is just the simplicity. This character's game plan is like very predictable. It's just, space, hit some nairs, condition people to shield and grab them, or shield break them and then whiff punish them with like kill moves. Like, it's actually a pretty simple, effective game plan. But that's the issue. Like, the character doesn't have setups that are like, put projectile on a control space or get resource to make yourself stronger. Kind of the power creep of other characters having a more varied toolkit, along with this character is just, slow speed, poor frame data, has left the character by wayside. All right, Shulk, Mr. Potential himself. He's, honestly, it's funny. Like, there's not much to say about him. He hasn't changed much since day one. Big sword to go burr. Arts in theory very good. In practice, you can play around them because, oh my god, he's red. He clearly wants to kill me. He's yellow. He can combo break easier. He's green. He jumps a lot, right? And I think the counterplay to him has been really obvious since day one. And him just having normal sword buttons means he can't really like catch you off guard. All right, Ken. Ken is, a character that surprisingly is the worst FGC character in my opinion now. Crazy to think that, he used to be considered a very good character probably. But over time, the obvious thing about Ken is he's really good up close. He doesn't have tools to get up close. His tools to get up close are his movement speed, like decent jump and aerials. And that's it. His fireball is kind of bad. Side B isn't a very good approach tool. Like, you watch Jazzo play his character, he basically relies on parries to get in. The character is decently heavy, can kill very early and put on insane damage, while being like impossible to scrap with up close to their frame data. But the inability to enable the strengths of their kit consistently, especially versus like the really good characters, hurts him a lot. And then Sheik. Sheik is the actual, like, if you're theoretically on point, she's high tier, right? If you're constantly executing well. The problem is people make mistakes. And this is a character that gets punished not by just getting hit for making mistakes, but losing the ability to deal decent damage and get kills. So I think because the room for error on this character is big, and like the punishment for error, and you have to consider human execution on tier lists, she's like top of upper mid tier. Has great matchups, especially characters that can get edge guarded pretty hard, she's really good in too, or characters that are like really easy to combo or just get overwhelmed. But especially versus characters that just want to scrap or can like really not interact with the opponent, like then she's just not that good of a character. All right, and now that's halfway through a tier list, right? So if you're liking this video, by the way, you should totally follow and subscribe, like the video, help the algorithm out, help me out. Now, with that said, we're getting to the part of the cast that's actually relevant, I'd say. Or it could be. So now we're barely high tier, quote unquote viable. These are the characters that it's like, I think these characters can be successful. Like, I think you could play these characters and do consistently well in tournament. It's not just, oh, they have a certain niche, but I also think you're doing yourself a disservice by playing these characters because they're just clearly weaker than everyone above them, right? Got Mega Man, like, good zoner, good buttons, but doesn't offer enough compared to just characters above him. Especially his recovery can be really exploitable. Yeah, I think it was a weird character because he's like actually a well-rounded, swordy, zoner-esque character that has some really good tricks. Something about it like just doesn't create a cohesive like top tier character. Mii Brawler might be the most underrated character in this part of the list. Honestly, this character could be a lot better. But the realization I've had throughout this game is, he's like Fox. Everyone knows this. But not quite as fast, not as crazy up close. Instead, has better recovery. He also has some really insane kill setups. Because he's a pretty straightforward, up close speedster character, he gets walled out a lot. And also, if you know how he wants to set up his combos, because it's mostly like setting up like an up air, up tilt, whatever, you can play around that really well by just not being above him and not like getting grabbed. Especially because he can't force you to fight him most of the time. And then Greninja, honestly, the issue with the Greninjas are shields. Having a badass shield game is so bad. You need a good ass shield game in Ultimate, in my opinion. That is like defining because of how strong shields are. And also not having the best shield pressure due to the slow speed on his aerials especially hurts him. Otherwise he's really strong. But he basically can't crack open a good defense well enough. Lucina, she's just fine. She's fine, but she's power crept. Characters all the projectiles, higher damage characters, bigger range characters. Like, yeah, she's just honest. Well, quote unquote honest. First Smash, so good move. Anyway, Pokemon Trainer. Honestly, in theory, is a good character. I think in practice, you just kind of have the issue of like all the Pokemon individually are fine, but none of them are particularly like, oh my god, amazing. Like Squirtle is good as like, you know, a close range fighter, but there's so many better characters for that. Ivysaur's a decent like spacer. Oh, that's me, zoner. Better character for that. Charizard's an okay heavyweight. What does he actually bring to the table compared to good characters? So it's like you just have 3 good characters that they do allow you, you know, to like have different playstyles in a match. Like it's harder to counterpick PT than most characters. The consistent weakness of all the characters though is their disadvantage. They all get juggled and ledge shot pretty well, and they're all pretty slow. So those are weaknesses that none of the Pokemon cover. And finally, Hero. Hero's weird. I'm not fully sure I put Hero. Hero actually might be really good, because like we've got to a point in the game where like Hero players just kind of space well with their sword, use that to create distance to set buffs, and then Hero with buffs is insane. But he's also binary in that if he isn't able to create space in a matchup to get buffs, he just falls apart. And especially due to not being that fast, having lots of startup and lag on his attacks, he's pretty susceptible to getting overwhelmed or whiff punished or just pressured with like faster projectiles. And now we get to the high tier characters. And as it says here, characters that are good, but outclassed. You can be successful with these characters. This isn't like these are actually very good characters. And for the most part, like this is where if you're struggling to do well with these characters, like it's just a player issue, right? Not saying these characters don't have bad matchups, and this is one of the key defining features of this tier, is I think all these characters have some really abysmal matchups versus like the top tier characters. So they kind of create this situation where they're better than everyone else below them. They really evenly match against each other. And then there's like a big gap where it's like these characters have some explodable weaknesses. It's like it's weird. I don't want to say you can't overcome their bad matchups, because you clearly can. But I think when you go into a bracket, you're expecting to fight the best characters, and you're still running into a lot of losing and what feels like unwinnable matchups for these characters. It's like the most frustrating tier of characters if you play one of these, because it's like, oh, this character's so good. Oh, I fought Steve or Sonic. Anyway, starting off Sora. You know, Sora is a character that, sadly, with Kamame not being active in events anymore, you don't see this character really, but this character is really good. You know, he's kind of potential man, like whoa combos, but like even without the crazy combos, because those are kind of unrealistic to consistently hit, all of his attacks are good. His damage output, kill power, spell, everything he has is really good. He's just so floaty in the air that he's really easy to anti-air over and over. And that's the one thing that holds him back. But it holds him back a lot because he's not able to interact with people enough to set up his damage. Even if like he's able to play really safe. He's hard to hit, he's hard to edge guard, all those things. Zero Suit. Zero Suit is an amazing character that's inconsistent. Legitimately, if up B, forward air was like a bit more consistent, she bumps up a lot. If she had slightly better answers for dealing with short characters, bumps up a lot. If she had slightly bigger hitboxes on her kill moves, like there's just so many things where she's so good, and it feels like the Zero Suit player plays right and gets punished for it anyway, and that's what holds her back more than anything else. All right, Ness. Ness is like kind of in the same in Smash for an Ultimate, where he's a gatekeeper character, actually extraordinarily well-rounded while having an insane punish game. The inability to properly combat swords has always been a huge factor, because sword characters tend to be really strong. Like if this was a meta where like the best characters were like Fox, Roy, Diddy, I think it'd actually be a top tier character. But in a game where people are playing Steve, Sonic, Aegis, like these characters that are hard to approach, that exploits Ness's biggest issue, which is he has to approach. All right, Wolf. Wolf is just kind of fine. He's good overall, well-rounded. You know, his weakness is he's kind of easy to edge guard. And I say kind of, it's not even like a bad recovery. It's just his recovery is weaker amongst the characters in this part of the tier list, I'd say. And he's also lightweight. But otherwise, he's still really good. He's just simple. He's kind of predictable. I don't really feel like there's room for him to grow. So like as other characters advance their potential more, he just is always going to be slowly falling off, I think. Pretty much been stuck in the same place for years in terms of like what he does. Which is why he's actually the worst Spacey now. And Falco is better. It's weird to say Falco's a better character, right? But this character over time, I feel like the results speak for himself. Where Falco has a lot of success. When Tony goes to events, he does well. In Japan, you have Motsunabe. I think there's another Falco doing well. Honestly, this character is always just has people doing well with him. And a large part of it is, one is a combo game, but two is jump height. Him having an insane double jump in particular, along with a really annoying laser, and a good reflector with his down B. It's hard to approach him. Like, he actually walls people out really well. He can camp phenomenally. So you have to approach him, but then he's so good up close. But also that double jump in particular lets him disengage a lot. Like if you don't like a situation with Falco, you can just jump away. You're trying to recover. Like you can just, your double jump is a recovery move in itself. It also means his combo game's insane. Like he can chase people for edge guards, combos, whatever. A lot more mobile than his speed stats would indicate. And choosing where to interact is a huge strength of top tiers. He ends up just being held back by not having disjoints and a still explodable recovery. It's similar. He held back by lack of disjoints, having explodable recovery, explosive character up close, has the speed to get in, has multiple burst options that can be hard to punish. He's decently heavy, and in fact, he is a mechanic with Go that rewards him for not dying. As a character with recovery mix-ups, decent weight, and a character that it's hard to kill characters you don't want to fight up close, right? Because most characters aren't killing super well off like spaced aerials or projectiles. Most characters are killing off of closer range moves, ledge traps, that kind of stuff. So, and you'll see this a lot with like Terry, Mario, Ness, where like they're living a lot longer than say a character like Mega Man will live, or Hero. These characters that like, you can overwhelm them once you're close. So that really plays into Terry's favor. And yeah, Terry's just held back by the fact that the really non-interactive characters, right? Like Steve, Sonic, or characters with insane space control with projectiles like Samus, deny him the ability to play the game. And that's where he's weakest, when he can't play the game. Alright, Corrin. You can't talk about Corrin without talking about Shattuck at this point. Right? Put the character on the map. It's like we all thought the character wasn't great, and it's like, oh no, actually the character's pretty good. Corrin, yeah, it's just simple, effective character. I think the thing about Corrin is, on paper, the character still isn't that good. But in practice, all of the character's attacks are a little overtuned. Like, all of Corrin's aerials are a little bigger and safer than what you expect from a sortie. All the combos do a little more damage than expected. The character kills a little bit earlier than you'd think. Then you have things like Side B being an amazing tool. A lot of little tricky things like using like the multi-hits on forward smash to ledge trap while covering ledge roll as well. The really, really hard to contest up B. That means Corrin will live to 100 plus every game. Granted, the character's actual ledge game isn't that great, and that's probably the biggest weakness of the character is that she does get ledge trapped in a game where a lot of characters have tricks to avoid the ledge. Like, hey, zero so down B. Hey, Surge or something above the stage and using your floatiness and neutral Bs to air stall and whatever. But yeah, like having to actually interact with the ledge hurts her more than anything else, and it's probably the biggest reason. At this point, I can't see her ever going into top tier. I know some people are going to put him as top tier. I don't see it. Character's good. If you play a super degenerate T-Jolt based style, especially, it's just like there's not good answers for that for most of the cast. But at the same time, good defense versus T-Jolts means, yeah, Pikachu chooses when to engage, and that's massive. And the character's combo game is good, edge guard's good, recovery is good. But the character's like actual damage output is really poor. And the character's game plan is really predictable. So also it means if a character has good answers for the game plan, like Steve Walls, for example, like Snake using grenades to like stop the approaches. And if a character is just really strong up close where Pikachu needs to be to get damage, character struggles. So yeah, solid character that I think if they had like one or two more like particularly good like ways to approach, would be top tier. All right, Ryu, interesting. Osmo's putting a lot of work in. You know, the character's clearly better than expected from before. We have to wait and see. He might end up being top tier, but I think that's about as high as he's gonna go. His fireball is just really good. Like, take the strengths of other FGC characters, right? Being in stand up close. Take the weaknesses. Poor disadvantage state, lack of range. That's Ryu, but with such an amazing fireball that, unlike these other FGC characters that can't quite control space to like enable approaches and disable like more defensive playstyles, Ryu can. Shanketsu is such an insane tool. Ledge drop, double jump, fireball is also really good to get off ledge with. The character also is more consistent than Kazuo or Terry in terms of combo. More consistent than Terry and Ken in terms of combos, right? So sometimes like you see people just fall out of those moves. With Ryu, no, this stuff just works and kills very early. Focus attack is of course really nice, especially his. Ryu's focus attack goes really far. And yeah, he's a really good character. I think just held back by the fact that he still can't force interactions on a lot of like the top tier characters. And his disadvantage state is very susceptible to good juggling and edge guarding. Alright, Mario. You're noticing a trend on a lot of these characters, by the way. Not much range. This character is the example of held back by the fact that the top tiers are characters with lots of range or the ability to just not interact to do the speed. And that's really it. Great character. But the best characters in the game kind of just uniquely are hard from the fight. And then Luigi's the same way. Luigi's interesting because he didn't seem like that good of a character for the longest time. And now we're seeing, you know, despite all the weaknesses Luigi has, being an actual touch of death character is really good. Like, being an actual touch of death character guarantees you're a good character. But being a character that struggles to approach versus the best characters in the game is also going to hold you back. So he ends up around here, close to top tier. Maybe it can be pushed if Luigi players showcase like fireball approaches more. Maybe parry can be used to approach more, or some of the counterplay. It's actually interesting to see this character go from like not that great to, he really kills you off like any tilt, aerial, grab, has a fireball to approach with, has a combo break, has a good show game. Like, man, he just can't approach. That's the only weakness. Can't approach. And then Pac-Man. Pac-Man has genuinely just been power creeped, I think, by like Steve. It's like Pac-Man's really good. A lot of the good characters are able to safely swat away Hydrant, or just like harass him with projectiles or their speed to not let him put down Hydrants or get his fruit charged. With that said, I think he's still a good character. I actually don't think there's a particularly good weakness. I think he is the definition of good Outclassed. And yeah, I think this tier in particular I want to mention. I think despite how many characters in this tier, this is the closest tier in terms of like how good characters are, in my opinion. Like, I don't even think like Pac-Man, for example, is that much better than Sora, the other side of the tier list. And I think these characters in particular, their strength fluctuates heavily based on the matchups they run into, or say like the brackets the players are having. So if you have a meta with lots of game watches, it's like, yeah, I think Pikachu just really struggles. But if you had a meta with lots of Sonics, yeah, Pikachu actually looks like much better of a character. Or maybe that's not the best example, but that's like the general idea.